Oh yeah, so back to your story that you were talking about at your practice, the physicians that were worth their weight, right, that were wanting to learn, you would tell them about nutrition. Is that where you were heading?
Well, actually, they were usually aware of
They
it.
were aware of it. Okay.
One of my big first debates with a man that became a exceptionally close friend he was a periodontist, and I asked him if he would work on TMD, temporal mandibular dysfunction. He said he had a very poor success rate with it. He said he was only batting about 500, 50%, and he said that was not up to his standards. And whoa, that's interesting. A doctor that's honest, you know.
And he's got high standards
And
too.
and he lives by his standards, and he demands more from himself. And I made a suggestion on redesigning a splint, and they actually called it the Farley splint. And his success rate went from 50% to somewhere around 90%. But we were having a discussion about fluoride. And this was many years ago, before all of the publicity about fluoride was coming out. I had already researched it, and one of the best studies, believe it or not, was done in South Africa by a dentist in South Africa that was serving both communities. He was serving the tribal communities that were getting unfluoridated water, and he was serving the city, and I can't remember the city, Johannesburg, in South Africa,
Yeah,
but it was a major
likely.
city that had fluoridated water. So he was able to compare, and he found, yes, there was a slight reduction in cavities in the children that were getting the fluoride, as opposed to the children that were not. However, they were also getting fluoridosis. They were also getting other side effects, weaker bones,
Osteosarcoma.
osteosarcomas, and once they reached adulthood, he found there was no benefit to fluoride at all. Now he did this study over a 20-year period, over innumerable patients. And reading that study got me interested in it, and I started reading more, and that's when I learned about Prescott and its use during World War II as a sedative for POWs. And I brought this up to this periodontist, and I said, you know, I think you're really harming patients with fluoride. You're not doing them any good. And he took a little offense at that. And we started going back and forth with emails, and I'd send him studies, and he'd send me studies. And I critiqued the studies that he was doing and saying, this study's not valid because of X, Y, Z. And I'd send it back to him, and he'd say, you're right.
You mean you actually took the time to analyze the study to see if it might be false?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's odd.
And
Most physicians
I actually
don't.
read them.
You
No,
actually read them.
you're actually right. They read the conclusion.
Yeah, they read the synopsis, like the Cliff Notes.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
conclusion doesn't tell you squat. But if you read the study and how the study was done and what the statistics, how they were manipulated, everything else. But he is so anti-fluoride, and within a year, he had taken fluoride completely out of his practice. And not only that, but he was teaching dentistry at Gainesville. And he was teaching implant dentistry all around. And he was teaching, don't touch fluoride. That's the type of doctors that I end up being with. The ones that are open, the ones that want to learn more, I guess because it's like me. I always know how little I know. And so I am constantly reading. But this doctor and I would literally be on the computer at 2 and 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, knowing we had to get up and start getting ready to go to our practices at 7:30.
Right.
Reading studies and exchanging information. And that happened with all of the physicians that ended up being very close friends with me. And the vast majority of them, ironically, were orthopedic surgeons. And
I've got a good friend that's an orthopod down in South Texas, and he's the same way. He's really open to learning new things, and as he learns, he's realizing how much he didn't know before, and he's opened up with me about that, and I really admire him because he's kind of going against the grain.
These, for some reason, orthopedic surgeons, one of my closest friends graduated from McGill medical school, went to school in upstate New York, and then decided to go to Canada for medical school because they actually have one more year requirement of surgery before you graduate. So they actually get a whole year more of surgical training before they graduate than they do in the United States. As I said, my first student that I took on was the head of orthopedics, Frederick Memorial Hospital, and he was a Harvard grad. For some reason, these orthopedic surgeons, and I believe from what they've told me, it's because they have to open these people up and do repair work. They can see a lot from the health of the bones. They can see a lot of the health of the organs when they have to go in deep. And they do a lot of neurosurgery, even though they're orthopedics, because they have more experience working around the spinal cord than a lot of neurosurgeons. Nothing against neurosurgeons. I have a few that are really close friends. But they seem to be the best educated. And the better they are educated, the more open they are to learning more. We're pumping out doctors now that are great at memorization, but they are sadly lacking in deductive reasoning.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that, back to the subject of my friend that's an orthopedic surgeon, he began to learn just in the last year. He's my age, so 43 years old, been a doctor for 15 years now, and he's just now learning about nutrition and the relationship of nutrition to health. And he's open to it. He's really open to it. And he said, wow, it's the most amazing thing. He said, you know, I changed my diet about 4 or 5 months ago and started eating more vegetables and less processed foods, and I've lost 40 pounds and feel great, and I've got more energy than I did when I was in college. And he said, I'm just now starting to realize personally the effect that nutrition has on your health. Because he says when he was in medical school down in Texas, went to the top medical schools down there in the South, he didn't get one class of nutrition and health. Didn't even learn about it at all.
There's not a medical school in the United States that teaches any courses in nutrition.